The rain lashing against the windows of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant was nothing compared to the storm inside Arthur Sinclair's soul. He was a king in a concrete kingdom, a man whose name could move markets and make fortunes appear from thin air. Forbes called him a visionary. Wall Street called him a shark. But at this table surrounded by Waterford crystal and the hushed whispers of the elite, he was just a father. A father watching his 10-year-old disabled son Leo struggle. And as the world's most powerful man felt his own powerlessness, he watched a simple waitress see not a burden, but a boy. What she did in the next 3 minutes would ignite a chain of events so stunning, it would redefine everything he thought he knew about wealth, poverty, and the true measure of a human heart. The restaurant was called Aurelia, a name that dripped with gold and old-world prestige. It was the kind of place where laughter was discreet, and the clinking of cutlery was a carefully orchestrated symphony. For Arthur Sinclair, it was a gilded cage. He hated it. He was here tonight for one reason only: Isabella Vance, the woman currently seated opposite him, whose beauty was as sharp and flawless as the diamond on her finger, a diamond he had placed there. Isabella was a masterpiece of social engineering. Her lineage was impeccable, her connections were vast, and her understanding of their world was absolute. She was the perfect partner for a man of his stature. Theirs was a merger, not a romance, a fact they had both silently acknowledged. Between them sat Leo. Leo was Arthur's world, his Achilles heel, his one point of vulnerability in an otherwise impenetrable fortress of wealth and power. Born with a severe form of cerebral palsy, Leo was confined to a state-of-the-art, custom-built wheelchair. His movements were spastic and uncoordinated. His speech was a challenge. But behind his bright, intelligent eyes was a mind as sharp as his father's. He missed nothing, especially the way Isabella's smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at him. "Leo, darling, try the risotto," Isabella urged, her voice like chimes of ice. "It's simply divine. The chef infused it with saffron from Valencia." Leo's hands trembled as he tried to maneuver the specially designed weighted fork toward his plate. He hated this. He hated the fumbling, the effort that was so simple for everyone else. He hated the subtle way Isabella leaned away from him, as if his disability were a contagion. Frustration, hot and sharp, pricked at his eyes. With a sudden, violent jerk, his hand spasmed. The heavy silver fork flew from his grasp, clattering onto the marble floor with a sound that seemed to slice through the restaurant's quiet hum. A hush fell over the nearby tables. Heads turned. Eyes filled with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity fixed on their table. Arthur felt a familiar surge of white-hot anger. Not at Leo, never at Leo, but at the world that stared. Isabella flinched, a flicker of genuine disgust crossing her face before being replaced by a mask of strained sympathy. "Oh, you poor thing," she cooed, her words a public performance of compassion. The restaurant manager, a tall, severe man named Mr. Henderson, materialized at their table instantly. His smile was a pained plastic thing. "Is everything all right here, Mr. Sinclair?" His eyes darted to the fork on the floor, then to Leo, as if the boy himself were a piece of spilled wine that needed to be cleaned up. "It's fine," Arthur said, his voice low and dangerous. "Just an accident." But Henderson was already signaling a busboy. No, allow us. We wouldn't want the young man to struggle further." The condescension was subtle, but to Arthur it was a slap in the face. This was the moment Chloe Evans' life changed forever. She was 24, a nursing student at Hunter College, working double shifts at Aurelia to pay for her tuition and her grandmother's mounting medical bills. She was exhausted, her feet ached, and she had just been reprimanded by Henderson for offering a glass of water to a busboy who looked faint. She was supposed to be invisible, a silent cog in this machine of opulence. From her station, she had seen the whole thing. She saw the boy's frustration, the woman's revulsion, the father's tightly coiled rage. But mostly she saw the boy. She saw the shame burning in his cheeks, the tremor in his lip that had nothing to do with his condition. Every rule in the Aurelia employee handbook screamed at her to stay put. Never engage a guest unless addressed. Your job is to serve, not to interact. The guest's privacy is paramount. Chloe's heart screamed louder. Before she knew what she was doing, she was moving. She walked past the gawking busboy and the disapproving Mr. Henderson, her steps calm and purposeful. She knelt down, not with the sigh of a servant, but with the grace of a professional. She picked up the fork, Her eyes, warm and brown, met Leo's. There was no pity in them, only understanding. "You know," she said, her voice soft enough that only the table could hear, "I think this fork is the problem, not you." She looked at the heavy, ornate piece of silver. "It's too slippery. It wants to run away." A tiny, hesitant smile touched Leo's lips. She addressed him directly, ignoring the billionaire and his fiancée. "I have an idea. Is it okay if I try something?" Leo, stunned to be addressed as an equal, gave a small, jerky nod. Chloe stood and disappeared for a moment into the kitchen, ignoring Henderson's furious glare. She returned not with a new fork, but with a simple, clean dish towel. She knelt again. "Let's give it a jacket," she whispered conspiratorially. With deft, practiced movements, the kind she was learning in her clinicals, she wrapped the towel tightly around the handle of the fork, creating a thick, textured grip. She tucked the ends in securely. "There," she said, placing it gently into Leo's waiting hand. "Now it has something to hold on to." Leo's fingers closed around the towel-wrapped handle. It was firm. It was steady. It filled his palm in a way the sleek metal never could. He looked from the fork to her face, his eyes wide with a feeling he rarely experienced outside the company of his father and his physical therapist's dignity. He lifted the modified utensil. It was stable. He scooped up a small amount of risotto, and with a concentration that was absolute, brought it to his mouth. And ate, successfully. A single tear traced a path down Arthur Sinclair's cheek. He wiped it away before anyone could see. Isabella stared aghast at the breach of protocol. Mr. Henderson looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. Chloe simply smiled at Leo. "See, the fork was just being difficult." She started to stand ready to melt back into the background. "Wait." Arthur's voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding. "What is your name?" "Chloe, sir. Chloe Evans." He didn't smile. His face was a mask of cold, unreadable granite. He studied her, his gaze intense, analytical, as if he were trying to deconstruct a hostile corporate takeover. He saw her worn-out shoes, the slight fraying on her uniform cuff, the exhaustion in her eyes. And he saw the genuine, unbuyable kindness she had just shown his son. In Arthur's world, nothing was free. Every act of kindness had a price, every favor was an investment. He was a master of calculating that price. But as he looked at this young woman for the first time in a very long time, his internal calculus failed him. He didn't know what she wanted, and that more than anything terrified and intrigued him. "Thank you, Chloe," he said, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. He then turned a glacial stare on Mr. Henderson, who flinched. "Ensure Ms. Evans is not reprimanded for her initiative." His gaze then fell on Isabella, who was looking at Chloe with an expression of pure venom. He saw it all. In that one brief, shining moment of humanity, Arthur Sinclair saw the rot at the heart of his perfectly curated life. The curtain had been pulled back, and what he saw next would stun everyone, most of all himself. The rest of the dinner was a silent, excruciating affair. The risotto tasted like ash in Arthur's mouth. Isabella attempted light conversation about an upcoming charity gala, but her words were hollow, brittle things that shattered in the tense air. Arthur's responses were monosyllabic grunts. His entire focus was internal, a whirlwind of calculation and reassessment. He was a man who trusted data patterns and history. His history taught him that people, especially people without money, were drawn to his. They orbited his wealth like desperate satellites, seeking a handout, a connection, an angle. He'd seen it all, sob stories, flattery, feigned admiration. He had become an expert at spotting the hustle. So what was Chloe Evans's hustle? Was this a performance, a calculated act of kindness designed to catch the billionaire's eye? She must have known who he was. His face was plastered over every financial journal in the country. The kneeling, the gentle voice, the clever trick with the napkin. Was it all a brilliant piece of theater for an audience of one? His mind a finely tuned machine for risk assessment spun through the possibilities. Hypothesis A. She's a classic opportunist. She saw her chance and took it. She'll be expecting a massive tip, maybe even a direct offer of money. Hypothesis B. She's more sophisticated. She's playing a long game. She wants a job, a position, a foothold in his world. Hypothesis C. The one his heart wanted to believe, but his head rejected. She is simply a good person who saw a child in need and acted out of pure compassion. This was the most dangerous hypothesis because it required something Arthur had long since buried trust. Leo, for his part, was quietly triumphant. He finished his meal with a slow, deliberate focus, his new and improved fork held firmly in his hand. He didn't look at Chloe again, but Arthur knew his son. He knew that the young waitress had just carved out a permanent place in his memory. When the bill came presented on a silver platter by a trembling Mr. Henderson, Arthur paid with his black centurion card without looking at the total. It was the tip that required his attention. This was his first move in the chess game he assumed was being played. What message should he send? Too large a tip would be crass in admission that her kindness could be bought. It would confirm hypothesis A. Too small, and he'd seem ungrateful cheap. He settled on $100 bill tucked discreetly into the leather folder. A generous tip for a waitress, but pocket change for him. It was a test, a baseline. But he did one more thing. He took out a pen and one of his personal business cards, the one without his corporate title bearing only his name, a private mobile number, and a single email address. On the back he wrote nothing. He simply slid it face down next to the $100 bill. The message was clear. The ball is in your court. Let's see how you play it. As they left Isabella clinging to his arm, Henderson bowed so low his forehead nearly touched the floor. I do hope the rest of your evening was to your satisfaction, Mr. Sinclair. I will have a word with the waitress about professional boundaries. Arthur stopped dead. He turned his eyes, locking on to the manager's. The temperature in the foyer dropped 10 degrees. You will do no such thing, he said, his voice a low growl. You will give her a bonus. If I find out she has faced any negative repercussions for what happened tonight, I will not only cease my patronage, but I will make it my personal mission to purchase this building and turn it into a homeless shelter. Am I understood? Henderson's face went pale. Crystal, Mr. Sinclair. Absolutely crystal clear. Arthur swept out, leaving the manager sweating in his wake. But Arthur knew men like Henderson. They were sycophants to the powerful and tyrants to the weak. His threat was a temporary shield for Chloe, not a permanent one. 2 days later, Chloe Evans was fired. Henderson was too clever to do it directly. He didn't mention the Sinclair incident. Instead, he manufactured a cause. He accused her of being late twice in the past month she hadn't been. He claimed a customer had complained about her attitude, a lie. He documented a failure to adhere to the restaurant's standards of service. It was a textbook case of retaliatory firing wrapped in the sterile language of corporate HR. It was her word against his, and she knew whose word the company would believe. She packed her locker in a daze, the injustice a bitter pill in her throat. Her final paycheck would barely cover her rent, let alone the new prescription her grandmother Eleanor needed for her heart condition. Despair, cold and heavy, settled over her. She went home to her tiny fifth-floor walk-up in the Bronx, a world away from the gilded halls of Aritia. The apartment was small and smelled of her grandmother's lavender sachets and old books. Eleanor was sitting in her worn armchair, a quilt over her lap, her breathing a little more labored than usual. What's wrong, sweet girl? Eleanor asked, her eyes sharp despite her frailty. You have your thundercloud face on. Chloe's composure broke. She sank onto the floor, laid her head in her grandmother's lap, and explained everything. The boy, the fork, the kind act that had cost her a job she desperately needed. When she finished, Eleanor stroked her hair. You did the right thing, Chloe. Kindness is never a mistake. Don't you ever let a man in a fancy suit make you believe it is. Kindness doesn't pay for your medicine? Nana, Chloe whispered, her voice thick with tears. Later that night, as she lay in bed staring at the water stains on her ceiling, she remembered the business card. She had found it tucked into her apron pocket left behind by the busboy who cleaned the table. She had almost thrown it away, assuming it was a rich man's casual, meaningless gesture. Now it felt like a lifeline and a temptation. She retrieved it from her wallet. Arthur Sinclair. The name felt heavy, powerful. What would he do if she called? Would he offer her money? The thought made her stomach churn with a mixture of shame and desperate hope. She wasn't a charity case. She had her pride. Her grandmother had raised her to believe in the dignity of work, not handouts. But then she thought of Leo. She thought of his frustration and the brief shining moment of triumph in his eyes. Her call wouldn't just be about her, it would be about him. That manager Henderson had created a toxic environment. What if another family with a disabled child came in? They deserved to be treated with respect, not disdain. For 2 days, she fought a war with herself. Pride versus pragmatism. Fear versus desperation. On the third day, a notice arrived from her grandmother's pharmacy. The insurance company had rejected coverage for the new medication. The out-of-pocket cost was $800 a month. It was a sum as insurmountable as Mount Everest. Her hands shaking, Chloe picked up her phone. Her pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. She dialed the number on the card, her heart pounding against her ribs. She didn't have a plan. She just knew she had to do something. The phone rang twice. A crisp professional voice answered. "This is Marcus Thorne." Chloe was thrown. She had expected Sinclair himself or a voicemail. "Oh, I was calling for Mr. Arthur Sinclair." There was a brief pause. "May I ask who is calling?" "My name is Chloe Evans." Another pause, but this one was different. It was a pause of recognition. "One moment, Miss Evans." A moment later, the voice that answered was the one she remembered from the restaurant, low, powerful, and laced with an unnerving calm. "Ms. Evans," Arthur Sinclair said, "I was wondering when you would call." "Akukum." The words hung in the air, clear indication that this was all part of his plan. He had been waiting. He had been watching. The game was afoot. "I was wondering when you would call." Arthur Sinclair's voice echoed in Chloe's small apartment, a sound of such immense casual power that it made the very air feel different. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. He had expected this. The business card hadn't been a lifeline. It had been a summons. Chloe's carefully rehearsed speech about Mr. Henderson and restaurant policy evaporated. You knew I would call. I knew you would be fired." He replied, his tone devoid of any emotion. "Men like Henderson are predictably petty, and I knew you were in a difficult financial situation. Pride can sustain a person for a time, Miss Evans, but it doesn't pay medical bills." Chloe felt a chill run down her spine. "How did you know about Marcus Thorne? The man who answered the phone is my head of private security and investigation. After we left Aurelia, I had him run a background check on you, a discreet one." He added as if this were the most normal thing in the world. "I know you're a third-year nursing student at Hunter. I know your GPA is 3.9. I know you're the sole provider for your grandmother Eleanor, who has a history of congestive heart failure. And I know the generic medication she's been on is no longer effective." Chloe sank onto the edge of her bed, speechless. She felt violated, exposed. This man had, in the space of a few hours, peeled back the layers of her life and examined them like a lab specimen. Her act of kindness had put her under a microscope. "Why?" she finally whispered. "Why would you do all that?" "Because I do not make decisions based on emotion," he stated flatly. "I make them based on data. You presented a variable I couldn't initially quantify. Now I can. Your file shows no criminal record, no history of litigation, no drug use. Your professors describe you as diligent and exceptionally compassionate. Your previous employers prior to Henderson describe you as reliable and hardworking. The data suggests you are exactly what you appeared to be that night." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Which brings me to the purpose of this call. I have a proposition for you." Chloe's mind raced. Was he going to offer her a check? Pay off her debts? The thought was both tempting and repulsive. "I am not interested in a handout, Mr. Sinclair," she said, her voice firmer, now a spark of defiance returning. "Good," he said, and for the first time she detected a hint of something other than cold analysis in his voice. It might have been approval. "Because I am not offering one. I am offering you a job, a position as a private caregiver and companion for my son Leo." The world tilted on its axis. For Leo. You connected with him in 3 minutes in a way that a series of highly paid, clinically excellent pediatric nurses have failed to do in years. They see his condition. You saw a person. He has not stopped talking about the lady with the clever hands. The raw fatherly affection in that last sentence cut through all of Chloe's fear and indignation. The position, Arthur continued, his voice all business again, would be demanding. You would live on the estate in a private suite in the staff wing. You would be on call whenever Leo is not with his tutors or therapists. Your duties would include managing his daily schedule, assisting him with his needs, and most importantly, providing companionship. Being his friend. He named a salary. It was a number so large, so astronomical, that Chloe felt dizzy. It was more than she could ever hope to make as a registered nurse. It was enough to give her grandmother the best medical care in the world and still have more left over than she had ever seen in her life. I would, of course, cover the full cost of your grandmother's medical care, including arranging for a top cardiologist and in-home nursing assistance for her. He added casually as if delivering the final crushing blow in a negotiation. It was a dream, a fairy tale, and a trap. What are the conditions? She asked, her voice wary. You would sign an ironclad non-disclosure agreement? Nothing about my life, my business, or my son ever leaves the grounds of the estate. You would defer the final year of your nursing degree. I would naturally finance its completion at a later date at any institution you choose, and you will work exclusively for me. There will be no other jobs, no other distractions. Golden handcuffs. He was offering her a beautiful, luxurious cage. She would be trading her tiny, broke but independent life for one of opulent servitude. And Isabella. The name slipped out before she could stop it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Ms. Vance is my fiancée, he said, his voice clipped. Your professional relationship will be with me and my son. You will be expected to maintain a respectful and courteous demeanor with all members of the household. It was a non-answer, and it told Chloe everything she needed to know. Isabella would be a problem. She thought of Nana Eleanor's labored breathing. She thought of the $800 pharmacy bill, and she thought of Leo's triumphant smile. I accept, she said. 2 weeks later, Chloe Evans walked through the towering wrought iron gates of the Sinclair estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. It wasn't a house, it was a principality. A sprawling stone mansion sat on 100 acres of manicured lawns, whispering forests and private shoreline. Her suite was larger than her entire Bronx apartment, with a marble bathroom, a walk-in closet, and a balcony overlooking the Long Island Sound. It was sterile, beautiful, and lonely. Her life became a structured routine dictated by Leo's needs. Mornings were for schoolwork with his private tutor. Afternoons were for grueling physical therapy sessions. But the hours in between the evenings and the weekends, those belonged to Chloe. And in those hours, something magical happened. She and Leo forged a genuine bond. She didn't just help him eat. She taught him how to cook simple things, modifying the kitchen tools just as she had the fork. They spent hours in the estate's vast library where she read him tales of adventure, his mind soaring to places his body could never go. They played video games with Chloe, helping him manage the complex controller. For the first time, Leo had a real friend. He laughed, a full, joyous sound that echoed in the cavernous halls of the mansion. He started making jokes, his wit as dry and sharp as his father's. Arthur watched it all from a distance. He'd see them through the security monitors that covered the estate, or catch snippets of their laughter as he passed the library. The cold, analytical part of his brain registered the data his son's mood had improved by 70%. His engagement with his therapy was up by 50%. His speech was becoming clearer, but the father in him just saw his son happy, genuinely, truly happy. The ice around his heart, packed hard by years of grief and suspicion, began to thaw. He started leaving his study earlier, joining them for a few minutes in the library, asking Leo about his day, and actually listening to the answer. Chloe remained professional, always addressing him as Mr. Sinclair, always maintaining a respectful distance. But she saw the change in him too. The way his eyes would soften when he looked at Leo. The way he sometimes lingered as if he wanted to say something more, but didn't know how. The one discordant note in this newfound harmony was Isabella. Isabella saw Chloe not as a caregiver, but as an usurper. Chloe had succeeded where she had failed. She had earned the affection of the one person Arthur Sinclair truly loved. She saw the way Arthur was beginning to look at Chloe, not with desire, but with a growing respect that Isabella found far more threatening. Her attacks were subtle, a campaign of 1,000 paper cuts. She would misplace a piece of Leo's specialized equipment only to have it turn up in a place that made it seem like Chloe had been careless. She would make comments in front of Arthur, cloaked in concern. Are you sure she's qualified for this, darling? She's only a student. What if there's a real emergency? She would compliment Chloe in a way that was demeaning. You have such a wonderful way with difficult situations. It's a real talent for someone of your background. Chloe weathered the slights with a quiet dignity that only infuriated Isabella more. She knew her position was precarious, dependent entirely on Arthur's goodwill. She was walking a tightrope, and Isabella was shaking the line. The tension in the house grew a silent, simmering war being waged in the opulent corridors. Something had to give, and when it did, it would be more sudden, more terrifying, and more revealing than anyone could have ever imagined. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday evening in late October. The air was crisp and a storm was rolling in off the Sound, the sky a bruised purple. Arthur had been called away to a last-minute emergency board meeting in the city, a hostile takeover bid that required his personal, predatory touch. He had left reluctantly, his final instruction to Chloe being, keep him safe. Isabella, deprived of her fiancé's company for the evening, was prowling the mansion like a caged panther. Her grand plans for a pre-gala dinner with influential friends had been dashed, and her mood was foul. She saw Chloe and Leo in the sunroom engrossed in building a complex Lego model of the Millennium Falcon. Leo was directing, and Chloe, with her nimble fingers, was the builder. The sound of their shared laughter was to Isabella like nails on a chalkboard. "Must you make such a racket?" she snapped, standing in the doorway, her arms crossed. "And shouldn't he be resting all this? Excitement can't be good for his condition." Leo's face fell. Chloe looked up, her expression calm but firm. "He's fine, Ms. Vance. We're just having some fun." "Fun?" Isabella scoffed, her eyes raking over the Lego creation with disdain. "He needs professional care, not playtime with the hired help." She turned her venom on Leo. "Your father spoils you. When I'm your stepmother, things will be much more structured, more disciplined." Leo flinched as if struck. A strange guttural sound escaped his lips, and his body began to tremble, a violent shudder that had nothing to do with his usual tremors. His eyes rolled back in his head, and his limbs went rigid. Chloe knew instantly what was happening. A tonic-clonic seizure, the most dangerous kind. It was the real emergency Isabella had always mockingly warned her about. "Leo," she cried, rushing to his side. "Ms. Vance, call 911 now." Isabella stood frozen, her face a mask of horror and revulsion. "What's wrong with him? Is he choking?" She looked at the boy convulsing on the floor as if he were an alien creature. "It's a seizure, call 911. Chloe commanded, her nursing training kicking into high gear. She gently rolled Leo onto his side into the recovery position, making sure his airway was clear. She glanced at the clock on the wall, timing the seizure, a critical piece of information for the paramedics. The Lego bricks scattered across the floor, a colorful testament to a moment of joy now shattered. I can't," Isabella stammered, fumbling for her phone. "My hands are shaking. You do it." She was utterly, completely useless, paralyzed by fear and disgust. There was no time. Chloe knew the protocol. Protect the patient. Clear the area. Do not restrain. Time it. Call for help. She couldn't leave his side. The panic button. "Ari," Chloe shouted, remembering the small, discreet buttons installed throughout the house that alerted the estate's private security and automatically dialed emergency services. "There's one by the fireplace. Press it." Isabella, finally spurred into some semblance of action, stumbled towards the fireplace. As she reached for the button, her oversized clutch bag slipped from her grasp, spilling its contents across the Persian rug. A tube of lipstick, a gold compact, her phone, and a small silver locket. It was Leo's locket, a gift from his late mother with a picture of her inside. He never took it off. It had gone missing a week ago, causing Leo days of silent, heartbreaking distress. Chloe had searched everywhere for it, convinced it had been accidentally lost during a therapy session, and there it was, fallen from the purse of the woman who was supposed to be his new mother. In that split second, Chloe understood the depth of Isabella's cruelty. The misplaced items, the subtle sabotage. It wasn't just about undermining Chloe. It was about tormenting a disabled child. The seizure seemed to last an eternity. Leo's body was racked with violent convulsions. Chloe spoke to him the whole time, her voice a low, steady anchor in the terrifying storm. "It's okay, Leo. I'm right here. It's going to pass. You're safe." Finally, after 2 minutes and 43 seconds that felt like a lifetime, the convulsions began to subside, leaving Leo limp, exhausted, and disoriented. Just as his eyes fluttered open, the doors burst open. The estate's security team, led by Marcus Thorne, swarmed in, followed closely by paramedics. The scene they found was damning. A terrified boy on the floor, a heroic caregiver tending to him, her face etched with concern, and a panicking socialite hastily trying to scoop her belongings and the silver locket back into her purse. But Marcus Thorne missed nothing. His sharp eyes caught the glint of the locket in Isabella's hand before she could conceal it. His expression remained neutral, but he logged the information away. Arthur Sinclair received the call as his helicopter was touching down on the estate's private helipad. The word seizure sent a jolt of pure ice through his veins. The multi-billion-dollar takeover he had just orchestrated meant nothing. All that mattered was Leo. He burst into the house and ran toward the sunroom, his heart hammering against his ribs. He found Leo on the sofa wrapped in a blanket, sipping water, with Chloe sitting beside him, holding his hand. The paramedics were packing up, giving Arthur a calm report, a significant seizure, but he was stable. They credited Chloe's quick professional response with preventing any injury and ensuring his airway remained clear. "She did everything perfectly, Mr. Sinclair. You're lucky to have her." Arthur's gaze fell on Chloe, her face pale but resolute. Then he looked at Isabella, who was now attempting to take control, fluttering around Leo with a show of panicked concern. "Arthur, darling, it was horrendous," she cried, rushing to his side. He just fell apart. I was so scared. This girl," she pointed a trembling finger at Chloe, "she just froze. I had to do everything." The lie was so bald, so audacious, that for a moment Arthur was stunned into silence. He looked at the calm, competent paramedics. He looked at Marcus Thorne, who was standing silently by the door, his face an impassive mask. He looked at Leo, who weakly shook his head, his eyes full of fear, not from the seizure, but from Isabella. And then he looked at Chloe, who simply met his gaze, her expression one of tired, sorrowful truth. "Marcus," Arthur said, his voice dangerously quiet. "What is your report?" Marcus Thorne took a step forward. "The emergency call was initiated via the panic button at 7:14 p.m., sir. Upon arrival, Ms. Evans was administering textbook correct aid to Leo. Ms. Vance was distressed." He paused. "I also recovered an item that Ms. Vance appeared to drop." He held out his hand. Lying on his palm was the small silver locket. Arthur stared at it. He knew that locket as well as he knew his own reflection. He had given it to his wife, who had put it around Leo's neck on his 5th birthday. He looked at the locket, then at Isabella's horrified face. The mask was off. The beautiful, flawless facade had cracked, and what lay beneath was ugly, cruel, and rotten to the core. All the little things, her subtle digs, her impatience with Leo, her thinly veiled disgust, snapped into focus. He had ignored the data points because he wanted the merger to work. He had prioritized business over his own son's happiness. The rage that rose in him was cold, absolute, and terrifying. It was the same ruthless focus he brought to the boardroom when he was about to destroy a competitor. He walked over to Isabella. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The venom was in the whisper. "The engagement is over," he said, his voice barely audible. "Marcus will escort you to your room. You will pack a single bag. The rest of your things will be sent to whatever rock you crawl back under. If you ever try to contact me or my son again, I will unleash the full force of my legal and financial power to obliterate every aspect of your life. You will not work. You will not socialize. You will not exist in this city. Now get out of my sight." Isabella opened her mouth to protest, to lie, to argue, but she saw the look in his eyes and knew it was over. All of it. The wedding, the status, the money, it was gone. Defeated, she allowed Marcus to lead her from the room. The sunroom was silent, save for the sound of the wind and rain beating against the glass. Arthur Sinclair, the billionaire shark, felt his knees go weak. He sank onto the ottoman opposite the sofa, put his head in his hands, and finally let the terror and guilt of the last hour wash over him. He looked up at Chloe, his eyes filled with a raw, desperate gratitude he had never shown another human being. "You saved him," he said, his voice cracking. "She lied, and you saved him." Chloe simply nodded her hand, never leaving Leo's. She hadn't done it for the money or the job or for him. She had done it for the boy. In the wreckage of that stormy night with the artifice of his life stripped away, Arthur Sinclair finally understood. The most valuable asset in his entire empire wasn't a stock, a company, or a building. It was the quiet, unassuming young woman sitting in front of him, the black waitress who had seen his son. The silence that followed Isabella's departure was heavy with unspoken words. The storm outside raged, mirroring the emotional tempest that had just swept through the house, leaving behind a strange and fragile calm. Leo, exhausted but safe, had fallen into a deep sleep on the sofa, his small hands still loosely holding Chloe's. Arthur sat not as a titan of industry, but as a humbled father. He looked at the scene before him, his son peaceful at last, and the young woman who had become his anchor. The contrast between Chloe's quiet competence during the crisis and Isabella's shrieking uselessness was a chasm that had swallowed his old life whole. He had almost shackled his son to a woman who viewed him as a defective accessory. The guilt was a physical weight pressing down on his chest. He finally broke the silence, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm sorry," he said the words, feeling inadequate. "I am so profoundly sorry." Chloe looked at him, her expression unreadable. "For what, Mr. Sinclair?" "For everything. For my suspicion of you. For putting you in a house with that woman. For not seeing what was right in front of my face. I brought a viper into my home, and you were the one who got bit. And you still protected my son. You protected him from her, and you saved his life." He gestured vaguely around the opulent room. "I can buy anything, Mrs. Evans, anything in the world, but I can't buy what you have. I can't buy character. I can't buy courage." "You don't have to buy it," Chloe said softly. "You just have to be willing to see it. In everyone." Her words hit him with the force of a physical blow. She wasn't just talking about herself. She was talking about the busboys, the waiters, the countless people his world was built to ignore. She was talking about Leo. He had spent so much time and money trying to fix Leo's disability, to mitigate it, to manage it, that he had sometimes failed to simply see the brilliant, funny, wonderful boy trapped inside the uncooperative body. Chloe had never made that mistake. He stood up and walked to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. He had a choice to make. He could do the predictable billionaire thing, write her a massive check, a bonus, that would set her up for life and thank her for her service. It would be a transaction, clean and simple. It would restore the comfortable barrier of employer and employee. But that felt like a coward's way out. It felt like a return to the man he was an hour ago. And he didn't want to be that man anymore. He turned back to her. "I've been thinking about your future, Chloe." Chloe gently extracted her hand from Leo's and gave Arthur her full attention, a flicker of apprehension in her eyes. "Mr. Sinclair, that name doesn't fit anymore. Please, call me Arthur." He took a breath. "You deferred your final year of nursing school to take this job. I want you to finish it, starting immediately. I'll arrange for a car to take you to and from your classes at Hunter every day. Leo's tutors and therapists can cover the hours you're gone. Your salary will, of course, remain the same." Chloe was stunned. "Arthur, thank you. That's incredibly generous." "It's not generosity," he countered. "It's an investment, which brings me to my next point." He walked over to his desk and picked up a pen. He began to sketch something on a blank sheet of paper. "I spend millions every year on charitable donations, mostly to things Isabella thought would look good on a gala invitation. It's hollow, meaningless. I want to do something real." He turned the paper around. He had written a name, the Eleanor Evans Foundation. Chloe gasped, her eyes filling with tears as she saw her grandmother's name. "I am establishing a foundation," Arthur said, his voice filled with a new, powerful sense of purpose. "It will have two primary missions. First, to provide full scholarships and living stipends for nursing students from low-income backgrounds so they don't have to choose between their education and their families like you did. Second, to fund and develop innovative new assistive technologies and compassionate care programs for children with severe physical disabilities. The kind of work that doesn't just treat the condition, but enriches the life." He paused, his gaze intense. "I'm seeding it with an initial endowment of $100 million, and I want you to run it. Once you have your BSN, I want you to be the foundation's executive director. You'll build the programs. You'll choose the candidates. You'll change lives. Your grandmother's name and yours will be a legacy of compassion. Chloe was speechless. The scale of it was unimaginable. It wasn't just a job or a gift. It was a purpose. It was a chance to multiply her single act of kindness 1,000-fold. "And Leo," she finally managed to ask. Arthur's face softened. "Leo will always be your most important client," he said. "Your role here will evolve. You won't be just his caregiver anymore. You'll be his advocate, his chief of care, a partner to me in ensuring he has the richest, most fulfilling life possible. You'll be family." Family! The word hung in the air, displacing the ghosts of loneliness that had haunted the great house for so long. He came over and gently placed a hand on his sleeping son's shoulder. "I thought my job was to protect him from the world," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I was wrong. My job is to build a world that is worthy of him, and I can't do that alone. I need you." It was then that Chloe knew her life was no longer about just surviving. She had stepped into a story far bigger than she could have ever imagined. It started with a dropped fork in a fancy restaurant, with a simple choice to see a boy instead of a problem, a choice to offer dignity instead of pity. That single quiet act of kindness hadn't just earned her a reward. It had exposed a fraud, healed a father's blind spots, and built a new future for countless children to come. Arthur Sinclair's stunning act wasn't giving a waitress money. It was finally learning how to invest in what truly matters: humanity. The storm outside began to pass, and through a break in the clouds, the first rays of dawn began to light up the sky, promising a new and brighter day. For the first time, the Grand Sinclair mansion truly felt like a home. The years that followed were not a fairy tale ending, but something far more real and profound: the steady, patient work of building a new reality. The changes were not instantaneous bolts of lightning, but the slow, powerful growth of a deeply rooted tree. Chloe enrolled back at Hunter College, but this time her world was different. A sleek black car, driven by a discreet chauffeur named Ben, would pick her up from the gates of the Greenwich estate each morning. She'd trade the hushed opulence of the mansion for the bustling, diverse energy of a city campus. Her classmates, many of whom were juggling multiple jobs and immense stress, just as she had had no idea about her new life. To them, she was just Chloe, the one who always had her notes perfectly organized, the one who was preternaturally calm during chaotic clinical simulations, the one who stayed late to help others practice inserting an IV. She never spoke of the Sinclair estate or the foundation that now bore her grandmother's name. She cherished the anonymity, the feeling of earning her place through merit, not patronage. Her grandmother, Eleanor, thrived under the new arrangement. The top cardiologist Arthur had arranged managed her condition with cutting-edge medication and treatment. A full-time home health aide meant she was never alone, and her days were filled with comfort and security. But her greatest joy came from Chloe's weekly visits. Every Sunday, Chloe would drive herself back to the small Bronx apartment, which Arthur had insisted on buying and renovating for them. They would sit for hours drinking tea in the newly remodeled kitchen, and Chloe would tell her everything, not about the wealth, but about the work, about Leo's progress, about the first scholarship recipients of the Eleanor Evans Foundation. During these visits, Eleanor would hold Chloe's hand, her eyes shining with a pride so fierce it was almost tangible. "You see," she'd say, "I told you. Kindness is never a mistake. It's a harvest." The Eleanor Evans Foundation became Arthur Sinclair's new obsession, but one he managed with a surprising and newfound wisdom. He poured his formidable business acumen into its structure, ensuring it was ruthlessly efficient and transparent. But he left the heart of it to Chloe. During her final year of school, she worked alongside him in the evenings. They would sit in his vast home office, surrounded by screens displaying global market data, but their focus would be on scholarship applications. Chloe would read the essays aloud, her voice filled with empathy for the stories of struggle and determination that mirrored her own. There was the single mother from Queens who wanted to become a pediatric oncology nurse, the young man from Newark who had been a caretaker for his disabled father since he was a teenager, the immigrant daughter from Brooklyn who dreamed of working in community health. Arthur would listen, his face unreadable at first, but Chloe learned to see the subtle shifts in his expression, the slight tightening of his jaw at a story of injustice, the soft glint in his eye at a display of resilience. He was learning to see people not as data points on a spreadsheet, but as stories, as investments in humanity. Chloe was his teacher. Leo, meanwhile, blossomed. With Chloe as his fierce advocate and friend, and Arthur as his newly engaged and present father, the world began to open up to him. He was fitted with a new cutting-edge communication device that allowed him to speak with a synthesized voice by selecting words and phrases with eye-tracking technology. The first full sentence he composed with it was for Chloe, typed out slowly, but with perfect clarity. "You are my best friend." He developed a wicked sense of humor, often using his device to heckle his father's business calls or to tease Chloe about her taste in music. He excelled in his studies, showing a brilliant aptitude for history and strategy, often beating his father at chess. Arthur, seeing this spark, had a new wing added to the house, an innovation lab for Leo. It was filled with adaptive technologies, 3D printers, and robotics kits. Leo, with Chloe's assistance, began designing his own assistive devices, a page turner for his books, a modified video game controller, a robotic arm to fetch things. He was no longer a passive recipient of care. He was an active creator of his own independence. The dynamic between Arthur and Chloe also evolved. The formal titles of Mr. Sinclair and Ms. Evans had long been abandoned. They were Arthur and Chloe partners in the two most important projects of his life, his son and his legacy. The line between employer and employee blurred into a deep, respectful friendship. They would have dinner together, the three of them, every night at the large oak table in the family kitchen, not the formal dining room. They'd argue about politics, laugh at Leo's jokes, and discuss the day's events. One evening, about 2 years after the night of the storm, they were walking along the private beach as the sun set a habit they had fallen into. Leo was up at the house, beta testing a new virtual reality game with his therapist. "The first class of Eleanor Evans Scholars graduates next month," Arthur said, his voice quiet. 10 new nurses going out into the world. Because of you." "Because of us," Chloe corrected gently. "I had the idea, you built the engine." He stopped walking and turned to face her. The setting sun cast a golden glow on her face. He saw the same compassion and strength that had captivated him in the restaurant, but now it was layered with a confidence and wisdom that took his breath away. The suspicious, jaded billionaire had been dismantled and rebuilt by this woman's quiet grace. He realized with a clarity that was both terrifying and exhilarating that his gratitude had long ago deepened into something more. Affection, admiration, love, a different kind of love than he'd had for his late wife. Less of a youthful fire, more of a deep, peaceful harbor. "Chloe," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "What we have, this life we've built for Leo, for the foundation, it's more than I ever thought possible. And the reason for that is you. You're the heart of this home, the heart of all of it." He took her hand. It felt natural, right? "I know our story's unconventional, but I have to ask, if you would consider making this partnership a permanent one, making our family officially a family." It wasn't a proposal born of passion or romance in the traditional sense. It was a declaration of truth, a recognition of what already was. Chloe looked into his eyes and saw not a billionaire, but a man who had learned the language of the heart. She saw a father who adored his son. She saw her friend, and she saw a future, not one she had ever planned, but one that felt more right, more true than any of her old dreams. "Yes," she said, her voice soft but sure. "Yes, Arthur. It already is a family. Nafshurnum." There was no diamond this time. There was no merger. There was just a shared understanding, a quiet joining of hands as they stood on the shore, looking out at the calm water, ready to continue the harvest of kindness together. In the end, this wasn't a story about a billionaire saving a poor waitress. It was the story of how a young woman armed with nothing but compassion and integrity saved a father and his son from a prison of wealth and isolation. Chloe Evans didn't just get a job, she ignited a legacy. Arthur Sinclair learned that true power isn't the ability to buy anything but the wisdom to value what is priceless. And Leo, he got the one thing money could never buy: a true friend and a future filled with dignity and hope. Their story reminds us that the smallest act of kindness can trigger the most extraordinary change. It proves that who you are is always more important than what you have. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and share it with others who need to hear a message of hope. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible real-life stories that will inspire and uplift you. What's the kindest thing a stranger has ever done for you? Let us know in the comments below.